Sometimes God doesn't send angels from the sky. He sends them from the darkest corners of the city. A haunted FBI agent carrying a guilt that stole his sleep, and a dog who senses death long before humans do. A single mom with only $9 left, choosing to run toward gunfire instead of away from it. That split second, under the flickering lights of an old gas station, changed the fate of an entire neighborhood. Because kindness doesn't just save a life. Sometimes it awakens hearts that forgot how to feel anything at all. But every miracle has a price, and the one they're about to pay is far heavier than anyone expects. Before we begin, what do you think is stronger? Prejudice or courage? Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. The city had a way of swallowing light. Out here on the edge of downtown, the street lamps flickered half-heartedly over cracked sidewalks and sagging porches. Night didn't fall. It seeped in. On the second floor of a tired brick building, Rowan Hales sat in a crooked wooden chair by the window, one arm resting on the rusted railing. He was 45, tall and solid, the kind of man who still moved like he was on duty even when he was supposed to be off. His dark brown hair was a little too long for FBI regulations, pushed back by impatient fingers. A short, trimmed goatee framed a jaw that always seemed clenched one notch too tight. His eyes, a deep hazel, were fixed on the street below. They were sharp eyes, trained to notice everything. But tonight, there was a distance in them, as if he was looking past the potholes, the broken glass, the shadowed doorways, and seeing something only he could see. He wore his old Navy FBI jacket, the one with the slightly faded yellow lettering on the back. It was unzipped, revealing a plain black t-shirt stretched over a chest that carried more tension than muscle. Tactical pants, brown combat boots. On his wrist, an old silver watch with a scratched face ticked steadily. It had belonged to someone else first, someone who wasn't here anymore. Odin lay stretched across Rowan's boots like a living barricade. The 5-year-old German shepherd was big even for his breed. Coat dark along the back and shoulders, tan at the legs and chest. His ears stood high, always listening. A faint scar marked the right side of his muzzle, a pale line through the short fur. A souvenir from a suspect who thought he could outrun a K-9 unit. He hadn't. Odin's eyes were open, deep brown and alert. He watched the world the way a soldier watches an abandoned building, calm, ready, never quite at ease. Every sound on the street pulled a tiny twitch from his ears, a ripple through his muscles. Yet when Rowan's hand dropped absent-mindedly to his head, the dog exhaled, leaning into the touch like a child pressing into a parent. Rowan's gaze wandered down to the road. The asphalt was patched and scarred, the kind of street that had seen more arguments than repairs. A car limped past, exhaust coughing. Somewhere a television was too loud behind thin walls. Somewhere else, a baby cried, and no one rushed to quiet it. Rowan knew these streets now. He knew who sold what on which corner, who checked the locks 3 times, who shouted at the police cars as they rolled by. He knew which kids watched him with curiosity and which watched him with suspicion. He also knew what it felt like to arrive 5 minutes too late. A year ago, in a warehouse outside the city, he had kicked in a door and found his partner bleeding out on a concrete floor. It had been chaos. Shouting, gunfire, the metallic smell of blood and gunpowder tangling in the air. But what stayed with him was the clock. The realization that his partner had called him. That he had been on the wrong street. That 5 minutes had stood between life and death. 5 minutes. The number lived in his head now. Every time he checked his watch, Every time Odin barked at nothing and the hair on the back of his neck stood up. He rubbed his thumb across the metal band of the watch, feeling the grooves. "I'm still here," he murmured, voice low, as if speaking to someone who might be listening. Or forgiving. Down the block, a door opened. Rowan straightened in his chair automatically, his training snapping him into focus. Odin's ears shifted toward the sound before Rowan even turned his head. A young woman stepped out of a ground-floor apartment, juggling a canvas bag and a worn-out backpack. Tessa Monroe. Rowan knew her name from the mailbox, from the landlord muttering about overdue rent. 28, single mom. She was slim, not with the sculpted lines of a gym membership, but with the weary thinness of someone who skipped meals. Her skin was a soft caramel, beautiful even under the sickly glow of the streetlight. Her dark curly hair was dragged into a high, messy ponytail, some strands escaping to brush her cheeks. She wore the same gray hoodie he'd seen her in a dozen times, sleeves pushed up, cuffs fraying, paired with faded jeans and sneakers that had seen better days. Beside her, a small girl clung to her hand. Leela, 6 years old. Big brown eyes that seemed too bright for this dim street. Her curls bounced around her face with every step, a wild halo that no amount of combing could ever really tame. She wore that yellow dress with the little cartoon dogs printed across it, a white cardigan a size too big, and pink sneakers scuffed at the toes. Rowan had watched them before. He knew how Tessa sometimes bent to shield Lila when a car rushed past, how she put herself between her daughter and the world without thinking. He had seen her carry bags heavy enough to make her shoulders tremble, while Lila skipped along beside her, happily explaining pictures she'd drawn at school. He had never spoken to them. That was the line he drew for himself. Observe, protect if needed, but don't step inside their lives. He told himself they didn't need a man with a badge and a broken conscience knocking on their door. Odin didn't agree. Every time Tessa and Lila passed below their window, Odin watched them with his full attention. Not the wary stare he used with strangers or the sharp focus he turned on suspects. Something softer, curious, as if he smelled something on them that wasn't fear or anger, but a kind of quiet courage. Tonight was no different. Tessa shifted the canvas bag from one shoulder to the other, her face tightening briefly. She glanced back at her apartment window, where a towel hung from a nail, their makeshift curtain. Behind that towel was a fridge that hummed loudly, but held almost nothing. Half a carton of milk, the tail end of a cereal box, a few slices of bread. She did the math again in her head, rent late, electric bill warning, inhaler refill for Lila's asthma, bus fare, tips that didn't stretch far enough. "You ready, baby?" she asked, forcing cheer into her voice. "Are we going to Mrs. Carter's or the laundromat?" Lila asked, voice light but sleepy. "The laundromat first," Tessa said. "Then Mrs. Carter will watch you while Mommy goes to the diner." Lila nodded solemnly, like a tiny adult accepting a business plan. "Okay, I drew a dog today. He looks like that one." She pointed up the street, though from this distance, she couldn't possibly see Odin in the window. Rowan's lips twitched. Odin's tail thumped once on the floor, as if offended he'd been reduced to that one. Tessa straightened her shoulders and started down the sidewalk. She walked a little faster than comfort allowed, not because she was late, she was always at least a bit late, but because she hated the dark. Not the night itself, but what people became when they thought no one was watching. Rowan's gaze followed them. His chest tightened in a way he didn't like to acknowledge. He saw the way Tessa kept herself between Lila and the street. The way her head turned just enough to scan corners, alleys, parked cars. She didn't have a badge, a gun, or a partner. But she watched like a cop, like a survivor. He wondered, not for the first time, what had hurt her badly enough to teach her that kind of vigilance. Odin's head lifted higher. His entire body went still. The low, rumbling growl that rolled out of his chest was not loud, but it vibrated against Rowan's boots like a warning. Rowan stiffened. "What is it?" Odin didn't move his eyes from Tessa and Lila. The street was quiet. No suspicious figures lurking, no car cruising too slowly, no raised voices. Just mother and daughter passing under a flickering street lamp, their shadows stretching and shrinking with every step. But Odin's growl didn't fade. It deepened. The fur along his spine rose, his tail stiffened, his ears pointed like arrows, locked on the path Tessa was walking. Rowan's hand slid automatically toward his side, fingertips grazing the place where his holster would be if he were on duty. "Talk to me, boy," he muttered. Odin did not bark. This wasn't his stranger at the door warning. This was different. Quieter, older, instinctive. A chill moved along Rowan's arms. He looked at his watch. The second hand swept 30 seconds. Odin's growl cut off as suddenly as if someone had flipped a switch. The dog blinked, yawned once, then laid his head back down on Rowan's boots. Rowan stared at him. Odin never did that. He glanced back toward the street. Tessa and Lila were turning the corner, disappearing from view. The night swallowed them. An unease settled in Rowan's gut, heavy and immovable. He didn't know what was going to happen, didn't know when or where. But he knew one thing with a certainty that made his heart beat harder. Whatever was coming, it had to do with them. He stayed by the window long after they were gone, watching the empty street like it might speak first if he stared hard enough. The wind scraped leaves along the pavement. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, then faded. Somewhere, a glass bottle shattered, followed by a curse. Inside the small apartment, the only steady sound was the tick of the old watch on his wrist. 5 minutes late. That was the phrase that stalked him. He had buried a partner because of 5 minutes. Another man's wife and children sat at a table with an empty chair because of 5 minutes. He flexed his hand into a fist, knuckles whitening, then forced his fingers open again. Odin shifted and pressed his weight more firmly against Rowan's feet, grounding him. The dog didn't understand time the way humans did. He understood presence, proximity, danger, loyalty. Rowan envied that. He finally pushed himself up from the chair and moved back into the apartment. The place was small but clean, everything in its place because he needed at least one thing in his life to feel controlled. A couch with tired cushions, a coffee table double-tasking as a desk, scattered with case files, a stack of folders marked with names of people he was trying to help quietly through his own little initiative. The Second Shield Fund. It wasn't official FBI work. It was his attempt to make sure some families got the help his partner's family hadn't. He paused by the table, fingers brushing over one file, then another. People crushed between poverty and crime, between systems and streets. People like Tessa, though he didn't know her story on paper yet. Only in silhouette. "Tomorrow," he murmured, the word falling somewhere between promise and threat. He had no idea how right he was. Tomorrow, there would be gunfire at a gas station, shattered glass, screams, a man in an old FBI jacket bleeding on dirty concrete. A little girl's breakfast money sitting folded in her mother's pocket while her mother made a choice no one would ever expect. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a German shepherd would stand between life and death. growling at the darkness, trying to drag his human toward the right, 5 minutes this time. Rowan didn't see all that yet. He only felt it in the heaviness of the air and the way Odin's scarred muzzle twitched in his sleep. Outside, in another apartment, in the same weary building, Tessa would be tucking Lila into bed, promising her that tomorrow they would have something better for breakfast than stale cereal. She would be counting money that didn't add up, staring at bills that refused to shrink, and praying quietly to a God she hoped still listened to people from forgotten neighborhoods. On this night, they were strangers sharing a piece of sky. By the next night, they would share something far more powerful. A single, dangerous, life-changing moment. If this story stirs something in your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. May God bless you, guide your steps, and let His miracles find you when you need them most. Tessa Monroe had learned to measure life in small numbers. Bus fare, coupon savings, tips crumpled in her apron. But tonight, the number staring back at her from her open wallet felt like a cruel joke. $9, a 5, 4 crumpled ones, and a handful of exhausted hope. It was everything she had left after paying rent, electricity, and the partial medical bill for Lila's inhaler. $9. Enough for a small carton of milk and the bus ride her daughter needed for school in the morning. Nothing more, nothing less. She tucked the bills back into the worn leather fold, closed it with a sigh, and kissed her sleeping daughter's forehead before leaving her with Mrs. Carter. The old woman, with her beige sweater and floral skirt, whispered a soft blessing over Lila as if shielding her from the world outside. Tessa walked into the night with her hoodie zipped up, the wind tugging at her ponytail, exhaustion clinging to her bones. The city had a way of sounding dangerous long before danger appeared. Tonight, the sidewalks hummed with unease. A stray dog barked from a distance. Tires screeched somewhere in an alley. A siren cried briefly, then disappeared like it had lost interest. Tessa kept walking, holding the straps of her canvas bag tightly, whispering silent prayers that tomorrow would not be as cruel as today. She reached the gas station, a flickering neon sign, bright enough to sting the eyes, old enough to flicker like a dying heartbeat. The cashier stood behind the counter, scrolling on his phone, barely glancing at her. Tessa walked past him, picked up a small carton of milk, and headed toward the counter. That was when the noise hit. A metallic crash, a shout, something heavy falling. Then, a gunshot tore through the air like a claw. Tessa froze. The milk carton slipped from her hand and thudded softly against the floor. Another shout, more gunfire, people screaming outside. She ducked immediately, her heart slamming against her ribs. Her hands trembled as she crawled toward the doorway, peeking out just enough to see the chaos erupting across the parking lot. Rowan Hale, no FBI jacket now, just jeans, a dark shirt, and the same unwavering intensity, was pressed behind a fuel pump. His jaw was tight, his hazel eyes sharp despite the dim light. He had been following 3 men earlier that evening, each one known in the neighborhood for dealing narcotics. He thought he had them tracked well enough. He thought tonight would end quietly. He thought he'd be able to do this without backup. He was wrong. One of the dealers had spotted the hint of metal clipped near his waistband. The concealed badge Rowan kept tucked under his shirt. All it took was one flash, one glint, 1 second too long. Gunfire erupted. The men scattered, one of them firing wildly. Odin lunged forward, powerful, fast, a blur of muscle and fur, as Rowan pulled a child out of the open, pushing the boy down behind a concrete trash bin. The bullet meant, for the child tore into Rowan's shoulder. His body jerked backward, his shirt blooming red. Tessa gasped, clamping a hand over her mouth. Panic shot through her chest. Her legs shook violently. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to disappear. But she couldn't look away. Not from him. Not from the dog standing over him. Odin positioned himself in front of Rowan, paws wide, body low, growl vibrating so deep it shook Tessa's ribs from across the lot. His brown eyes, usually soft, alert, gentle, looked almost human in their fear. He wasn't just defending his handler, said he was begging for help. Rowan tried lifting an arm to grab the dog's harness, but his fingers trembled too hard. His other hand reached toward his belt, not for a weapon, but to cover his badge. He pressed his palm over it, as if afraid someone would see it and walk away instead of helping him. That broke something inside Tessa. The cashier locked the door, his face pale. Hey, what are you doing? Don't go out there. Anyone helping a cop dies with him." Tessa didn't answer. Couldn't. Her breath came in sharp stabs. Fear curled around her like cold hands. She thought of Lila. Lila, who needed her to come home. Lila, who only had her. But she also thought of Rowan's eyes, the way they dimmed, the way his hand trembled, the way Odin stood over him, refusing to move. She ran. She grabbed the door, ignored the cashier's curses, and sprinted out into the open. Gunfire had stopped, but the air still shook with echoes. She dropped beside Rowan, hands trembling so hard she couldn't open her bag at first. Odin leaned in, pressing his muzzle against her wrist, steadying her. It was a silent message. "Do it. I trust you." Her $9, the last of her security, bought bandages, water, and 2 cold packs from the gas station fridge. She tore the bandage open with her teeth, pressing it hard against the bleeding wound. Rowan sucked in a breath, his jaw tightening, but he didn't push her away. His voice was barely a whisper. "You shouldn't. Don't talk," she said, tears flooding her vision. "Save your breath." He tried again. "You have a daughter. Don't risk—" "Shut up!" She snapped through her fear. "Let me help you." Odin nudged her again, tail low, body tense. It was as though the dog understood everything, that her hands shook because she was terrified, that she stayed because she refused to let someone die in front of her. She tied the bandage tightly. Blood seeped through. Her fingers slipped. She pressed harder. Rowan groaned softly, the sound raw and human and painful. He blinked up at her. His hazel eyes were dull now, fading. But the moment they met hers, something clear flickered inside them. A thank you. A plea. A confession he didn't have the strength to speak. Odin suddenly lifted his head, ears slicing through the air. His gaze snapped toward the shadows behind the station. A deep, warning growl rose from him, louder than before, rising, swelling, almost shaking the pavement. Tessa flinched, whipping her head toward the darkness. At first she saw nothing, but then, just barely, a silhouette dashed between parked cars. Someone still there, someone watching, someone waiting. Odin lunged forward, muscles coiled, but Rowan caught his harness with his good hand, dragging him back. The dog whined in frustration, as if he sensed danger that hadn't finished breathing yet. Sirens wailed in the distance, not frantic, but closing. A breath later, paramedics rushed in. One knelt beside Rowan, a man with sandy blonde hair and tired eyes. His name tag read Miller, a paramedic in his early 30s, thin but steady-handed, with the calm of someone who had already seen more emergencies than he wanted to remember. Miller pressed down on Rowan's wound, eyebrow lifting in mild surprise. "Bandaging's good. Tight. Whoever did this bought him 3 minutes." His gaze shifted to Tessa. Confusion flickered across his face. Why would a woman in a gray hoodie, shaking like a leaf, Be the one holding a bleeding FBI agent. He didn't ask. Maybe he recognized courage when he saw it. He simply said, "Ma'am, if you hadn't done this, he wouldn't be conscious." Tessa stepped back, chest heaving, unable to breathe. She watched as Rowan was lifted onto the stretcher, eyes barely open now. He looked at her one more time, slow, weak, but full of something that made her stomach tighten. A whisper, barely audible. "Thank you." Then he was gone, swallowed by the flashing lights. Tessa stared at her hands, covered in his blood, and it hit her like a blow. She didn't know if she had saved a man, or just destroyed the little safety she had left for her and Lila. If this moment touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. May God bless your compassion, protect your home, and send His miracles when you need them most. Morning broke without mercy. Pale light leaked into the tiny apartment through the warped window that never fully shut. Brushing over cracked walls, a sagging couch, and a refrigerator whose hollow echo had become part of Tessa's daily soundtrack. She opened it anyway, like a ritual she couldn't abandon, even though she already knew what she'd find, nothing but a lonely half bottle of water and a single pack of crackers she had saved for Lila. Her 6-year-old daughter, with curls tumbling to her shoulders and warm brown eyes too soft for a world this harsh, padded out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, what do we eat today?" Tessa swallowed a nod. "You can have the crackers, baby." "What about you?" "I'm not hungry." She forced a smile she didn't feel. "I had something earlier." Lila stared at her for a long second, the way children sometimes sense truth beneath a lie. Slowly, she broke one cracker in half and handed the larger piece to her mother. "Eat with me." Tessa's throat tightened. She took it, even though guilt weighed heavier than hunger. "Thank you, sweetheart." They ate in silence, small crumbs and big worries shared between them. Outside, the neighborhood had already learned what happened the night before. Gossip in this part of town traveled faster than sirens. Women hanging laundry whispered behind their hands. Men fixing cars shook their heads. Teenagers scrolling their phones smirked at the newest rumor. Tessa helped a cop? She crazy? She's a single mom. Who's gonna protect her when those dealers come back? Siding with FBI? That's how you get a target on your back. The words drifted up to her window like smoke. Poisonous. Persistent. Mrs. Carter knocked gently before letting herself in. The 62-year-old wore her beige sweater and long floral skirt like armor against the cold, her gray curls pinned neatly in place. Her soft brown eyes glistened with worry the moment she saw Tessa. "Child," she whispered, gripping Tessa's hands. "I heard what you did last night." "I didn't do anything special," Tessa muttered. "Anyone would have helped." "Oh no, sweetheart," Mrs. Carter said quietly. "People do not help bleeding cops in this neighborhood. You know that. Tot bon quoi. Sometimes it becomes a burden, a dangerous one." "I know," Tessa whispered, "but I couldn't just watch him die." "I understand." Mrs. Carter nodded, squeezing her shoulder. "But please, be careful. You have little Lila to think about." When she spoke Lila's name, fear flickered across Tessa's expression. She knew the older woman was right, but truth didn't change the ache of doing the right thing and being punished for it. At the laundromat, the whispers were harsher. Customers eyed her like she had committed a crime. A tall woman folding jeans snorted loudly. "Look at her. Cheap clothes, cheap life, and now she thinks she's some kind of hero." A skinny man with a crooked mustache chimed in. "Who's she trying to impress? Cop lover?" Laughter, low and mean. Tessa kept folding, kept breathing, kept pretending her eyes weren't burning. She turned away before tears gave them the satisfaction of victory. But some wounds didn't need knives. They bled anyway. Tessa carried the sting of their words like an invisible bruise she had learned to hide beneath hoodie sleeves and quiet endurance. She was wiping down a dryer when her old phone buzzed in her pocket. The number was unknown. She hesitated before answering. Hello? A deep voice, warm yet strained, filtered through. Is this Tessa Monroe? Her blood froze. She recognized the voice, even though she had only heard it once. Soft, ragged, on the edge of consciousness. This is Special Agent Rowan Hale, he continued. You saved my life. Her stomach dropped. She turned to the wall, gripping the laundry basket to steady herself. You kept pressure on the wound, Rowan said calmly. You called for help. You stayed when everyone else ran. That isn't just anything. Tessa squeezed her eyes shut. Why are you calling? Because I owe you more than a thank you, Rowan replied. And because I'd like to meet you. Not as an FBI agent, as a man who wouldn't be breathing right now if not for your courage. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. He continued, voice quieter now. Please, let me thank you properly. I don't take debts like this lightly. Tessa nearly hung up. Fear clawed up her spine, the kind that comes from being poor, alone, and too visible. But there was something in Rowan's tone. Humility, sincerity, a quiet grief she didn't understand, that kept her from pressing the red button. Where would we meet? She whispered. Someplace public, Rowan said immediately. Safe, you choose. She bit her lip. I don't know. It doesn't have to be today, he said gently. You saved my life last night. I can wait as long as you need. Before she could respond, Odin barked in the background, a firm, commanding sound, not aggressive, but alert. Rowan murmured something to calm him before returning to the call. The dog's voice, steady, protective, sent a strange shiver through her. It sounded almost like reassurance, like the canine guardian was telling her she wasn't alone in this. She took a breath. Let me think about it. Take all the time you need, he said softly. And Tessa, thank you for seeing a human being where others saw a badge. When the call ended, she stood frozen, caught between fear of retaliation and the unexpected warmth blooming in her chest. That night, long after she tucked Lila into bed, Tessa sat alone in the dim apartment. She replayed Rowan's voice in her head, calm, grateful, wounded in ways she didn't fully grasp. She didn't notice Odin until she looked out the window. Across the street, in the shadows near Rowan's building, the German shepherd stood still, head lifted, watching her window with an intensity that made her breath catch. His tail wasn't raised, not threatening, just aware, present, almost as if he sensed her fear and was standing guard from afar. When a car backfired down the block, Odin didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped forward, planting himself directly beneath the streetlight, looking up until their eyes met across the distance. A silent vow, a promise of protection, or destiny. Then he turned back toward Rowan's building and vanished inside. The next morning, rumors had grown teeth. Mothers pulled their kids away when she passed. Shop owners whispered caution. Even teenagers taunted her. Yet beneath the noise, Tessa felt something shift inside herself. Something small but stubborn. A spark. Someone had seen her kindness not as weakness, but as courage. Rowan had said he owed her his life. No one had ever owed her anything. Tessa didn't know what would happen next, whether danger was coming, whether Rowan meant the things he said, whether she had just made the biggest mistake of her life, or the first step towards something she didn't have a word for yet. But she knew one thing. She wasn't ready to hang up on the man she saved. If this story moved your spirit, please like, comment, and subscribe. May God's grace protect your home, guide your steps, and send miracles into your life. The diner door chimed with a soft, metallic ring as Tessa stepped inside, expecting the usual lunch hour chatter, the clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, Linda humming off-key as she refilled cups. But instead, the entire room froze around her, like time itself had forgotten to move. Every table was occupied, but not by regular customers. Men and women in plain clothes sat scattered throughout the diner. Their movements were crisp, their shoulders squared, their postures too disciplined to belong to anyone but law enforcement. Some wore jackets that couldn't quite hide badges clipped inside. Others had military short haircuts, quiet eyes sharp as razors. And in the far corner, lying neatly by a booth, was Odin. The German shepherd's black and tan coat gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His pointed ears twitched as he sensed her, and he lifted his head, watchful, calm, impossibly intelligent. He didn't growl, he didn't bark. He simply stared at her with a depth that made her stiffen in place. Then, every single agent in the room stood, not rushed, not startled, deliberate, respectful. Tessa's breath caught. She looked around as the agents offered small nods, silent gestures of acknowledgement, gratitude, something she didn't feel she deserved. She nearly turned around and fled. "Over here," Rowan said quietly. He sat in the corner booth, his arm in a sling, a thick bandage hidden beneath a dark sweater. His hair was slightly messy, and the exhaustion etched into the edges of his eyes made him look older than 45. Yet there was a steadiness about him, like the kind of man who carried storms on his shoulders, but still tried to shield everyone else from the rain. Tessa approached the table on shaking legs. Odin rose, circled once, and lay back down beside Rowan's feet as if returning to his post, as if guarding them both. She lowered herself into the seat across from Rowan, feeling the weight of the room settle around her. "You didn't tell me about this," she whispered. "I didn't plan it to happen this way," Rowan answered, voice low and raw. "They insisted on being here. I guess word spreads fast when you save the life of an FBI agent." Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. "Can we not make it a big thing? I didn't do it for attention." "I know," Rowan said softly. "That's why it matters." He sat back, exhaling slowly. Then, almost reluctantly, he began to talk. And the walls of steel around him cracked open. He told her about the raid last year, how his partner, Agent Wyatt Keller, a tall, sharp-featured man with a loud laugh and bigger heart, died because Rowan arrived 5 minutes too late to back him up. Wyatt had been more than a co-worker. He was a brother, someone Rowan had trusted enough to name as Odin's second handler, someone who had mentored him, someone who always said, "A good man saves people. A great man saves even those who don't deserve it." But Rowan hadn't saved him. And that guilt carved a permanent wound into him. A wound that no badge, no mission, no promotion could ever hide. He told her about the nightmares, the nights he woke drenched in sweat, the days he wondered if he was still the kind of man he once took pride in being. And finally, about the charity fund he had created, the Second Shield Fund, designed to help families caught in the crossfire of violence. People who suffered because law enforcement arrived too late, just like he had. He talked slowly, like each piece of the story was a stone being lifted off his chest. His voice wavered only once, when he said he had stopped believing civilians cared at all. "I thought people only saw the badge," he admitted, "not the man behind it." Then he lifted his gaze to her. "Until you." Tessa felt the diner tilt beneath her. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to hold the weight of another person's pain when her own life was already balancing on a thread. But Rowan wasn't finished. "You made me believe again," he whispered, voice cracking. "Not in law enforcement, in people, in grace, in whatever goodness is left in this world." A strange ache spread through her chest, something between gratitude and fear. She drew a breath to respond, but Rowan suddenly leaned forward, his voice shifting, firmer, more troubled. "Tessa, I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear it without misunderstanding my intent." Her shoulders tensed. "What is it?" "You can't keep risking yourself like this," he said. "Not when you have a daughter depending on you. You were brave, but you—" She flinched. There it was. The thing she feared. The thing that always came. Judgment dressed as concern. He didn't even finish the sentence before she stood so abruptly the agents at nearby tables reacted. Rowan froze. "You don't get to say that," she said, voice trembling, not with fear, but with fury. "You don't get to tell me what risks I can take, who I can help, or how I'm supposed to be a mother." "Tessa, no." She shook her head, eyes burning. "I didn't save you because you're FBI. I didn't even know your name. I saved you because you were a bleeding man dying on the pavement. That's it. That's all." Rowan sat there, still stunned, like her words hit him harder than any bullet. Odin let out a soft whine, sensing the shift in energy. The dog nudged Rowan's leg, then turned his amber eyes toward Tessa, ears slightly lowered. An almost human gesture, as if urging peace. Rowan lowered his gaze. "You're right," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Tessa. I shouldn't have said it." Silence settled between them, not awkward, but heavy with something unnamed. Finally, Rowan looked up, pain and sincerity mixing in his expression. "There's something else I need you to know," he said. "Tomorrow morning, something will happen in your neighborhood. Something that might scare people." Her pulse jumped. "What kind of something?" "I can't tell you details," Rowan replied. "But it's meant to protect you, all of you. It's not a threat, it's a gift, a promise, a shield." He leaned forward, meeting her eyes with a gravity that sent chills through her. "All I'm asking is, don't be afraid." The room felt colder. Tessa didn't move, didn't breathe. And for the first time since the night she pulled him back from the brink of death, she realized something startling. Rowan Hale wasn't warning her. He wasn't intimidating her. He wasn't trying to control her. He was asking for her trust, not as an agent, not as a stranger, as a man whose life she had changed. If this chapter touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. May God bless your home, protect your family, and send His miracles upon your path. Snow had started falling before dawn, thin flakes drifting like cold ash over a neighborhood that had long forgotten softness. By 7 a.m., the street outside Tessa's building glowed weirdly bright. Blue, red, and white lights, flashing against cracked walls and sagging balconies. Engines hummed low, radios crackled, tires crunched on frost. And then the rumble came. 8 unmarked FBI vehicles, 3 police cruisers, 1 massive tactical truck, a K9 transport van idling like a steel beast. Odin stepped out first, paws landing with military precision, black and tan coat shining under the pulsing lights. His breath formed white clouds in the air, his pointed ears turning as he scanned rooftops, porches, alleyways. Protective, alert, impossibly calm. Behind him, the FBI team moved in formation. Rows of agents in winter jackets, tools in hand, hammer drills, sealed crates, equipment bags. No guns drawn, no orders shouted, just presence. Too much presence. People poured out of their houses in confusion and fear. Doors slammed open, curtains flew up, phones lifted, voices rose in panic. FBI raid. Who were they coming for? Tessa's fault. I knew that girl would bring trouble here. They're gonna drag someone out in cuffs. Within minutes, the street became a stage, and the audience was the entire internet. Live streams launched, comments exploded, cops terrorizing poor neighborhoods again. That single mother asked for it. These feds only show up for PR stunts. Watch, someone's getting shot today. Tessa stood on her porch clutching Lila, heart pounding so hard she didn't hear her own breath. Lila buried her face against her mother's shirt, trembling. Then Rowan walked into the center of the street, not in his FBI tactical jacket, not wearing anything that screamed authority. Just a dark sweater pulling tight across the fresh bandage on his shoulder, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. His presence stopped even the wind. He raised a hand toward the crowd, not to command but to quiet. "We're not here to arrest anyone," he said, his voice steady, echoing off concrete walls. "We're here because a woman in this neighborhood saved my life. With her last $9, money she needed for her daughter's breakfast, money she didn't have to give." The murmurs stopped, but suspicion remained. A thin, sharp-faced man shouted, "Don't use her to make yourselves look good." Another voice, "I bet this is some camera setup for FBI media. We're not stupid." A woman live streaming sneered, "They always act like heroes when people are filming." Rowan didn't react with anger. If anything, his expression softened, almost painfully. "You're right to question things," he said. "This neighborhood has been let down too many times. By the city, by institutions, by people who promise help and never show up. I'm not here to ask for trust. I'm here to earn it." But actions always speak louder than speeches. And Rowan's team began moving, not toward doors to break them, but toward problems to fix. 3 agents climbed onto Mrs. Patterson's roof to repair the leak she'd been living with for years. She was an elderly woman with silver hair pinned in a bun, thin shoulders wrapped in a knitted shawl, staring up in disbelief as the agents synchronized their work. 2 more replaced the broken door of Mr. Williams. The elderly man with trembling hands who had used duct tape to keep rain and thieves out. His eyes glistened as the agents worked. A food relief team unloaded crates, fresh vegetables, canned goods, baby formula, bread, handed quietly to families who needed it. The K9 medical unit set up a small tent where technicians checked blood pressure, lung function, and provided free medicine. Odin stood by the entrance, tail calm, gentle eyes guiding nervous seniors forward as if personally inviting them to safety. And then the most unexpected thing happened. A little girl began screaming, not out of fear, out of panic. She had sensory issues, overwhelmed by lights and noise. Odin walked to her slowly, lowering himself onto the ground, ears relaxed. He pressed his forehead to her small hands until her breathing slowed and her sobbing softened into quiet hiccups. One by one, people stopped recording, stopped shouting, stopped doubting, and simply watched. As the neighborhood thawed into stunned silence, Rowan stepped beside Tessa with a small, sealed envelope in his hand. But before he could speak, Odin lifted his head sharply, staring past them, eyes locked on something no one else noticed. His tail stiffened, His ears rose like twin arrows. For a heartbeat, the entire street seemed to freeze around the dog's posture. Then Rowan followed Odin's gaze. Straight toward a third-story window where a silhouette, a man tall, rigid, motionless, stood watching them with an expression impossible to read. As soon as Rowan's eyes locked onto him, the silhouette stepped back and vanished. No one else noticed. Only Rowan. Only Odin. A warning. A ghost from Rowan's past. Or the first sign of a storm still waiting to break. Rowan turned back to Tessa, pushing the tension down with visible effort. He handed her the envelope. Inside were 3 things: a check covering her rent debt, a formal job offer from the Second Shield Fund with stable income and benefits, and insurance papers guaranteeing Lila permanent medical coverage. No more skipping refills, no more fear of asthma attacks at midnight. Tessa stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. "Rowan, I can't accept this." "You can," Rowan said softly. "And you should. You earned every bit of it." The crowd watched, whispering, arguing among themselves. Some faces softened with genuine hope. Others hardened with suspicion and bitterness. And then the critic emerged. A woman stepped forward, slender, mid-30s, curly black hair braided tightly, jaw clenched. She wore a faded red coat and boots too thin for the cold. Her name was Marilyn Hall, a childhood friend of Tessa, once inseparable, now distant shadows of different paths. Marilyn carried resentment like a scar across her features. "Tessa always gets special treatment," she snapped. "First she helps a cop, now she gets paid like some kind of hero, while the rest of us suffer." Tessa blinked. "Marilyn, what are you talking about?" "You think you're better than us," Marilyn fired back, voice rising. "You think saving one FBI guy makes you a saint? Wake up, they're using you." The crowd stirred again, agitation spreading like smoke. But something changed inside Tessa then. Days of fear, weeks of hunger, years of scraping by, and a lifetime of being quiet, being small, being invisible. For the first time, she lifted her chin and stood tall. "If anyone thinks I'm getting a benefit, you're right," she said, voice strong even as it trembled. "My daughter will finally have medicine, and if that makes you angry, then maybe you need to ask yourself why a child having medicine offends you." Silence cracked across the entire street. "And listen to me," she continued. "If you stop being afraid for 1 minute and open your heart, this—" She gestured to Rowan's team, to the repairs, to the food being delivered, "is for all of us. Not just me. All of us." Marilyn faltered. People looked down. No one had a comeback. The neighborhood stood still, not in hostility this time, but in thought. The kind that changes things. The kind that starts miracles. If this chapter moved your soul, please like, comment, and subscribe. May the Lord bless your home, protect your heart, and send His grace upon your family. Snow melted into spring, and spring baked into the kind of summer that made the neighborhood smell like warm asphalt and tired hope. Monroe House stood at the center of it all, its fresh paint bright against the dull brick buildings around it, its windows glowing every evening like a heartbeat for the entire block. But the storms didn't stay away. Storms rarely do. The video of the FBI convoy, the one meant to show Rowan's team repairing homes, offering food, giving medical aid, had been uploaded raw, without context. And the internet, hungry for outrage, devoured it. Edits removed the repairs, removed the elderly smiles, removed the food crates. What remained looked like militarized intimidation. A hashtag rose up in hours. "Stop police PR." Then another. "No mascots for cops." Tessa's face was everywhere. Screenshots of her holding the envelope Rowan gave her, photos of her speaking on her porch. But the captions twisted her story into something ugly. She's just a single mom used as a prop. Paid actress for the government. Poverty puppet. And the worst one, circulating on 1,000 hateful comments. Single mom mascot. She read it so many times, she almost believed it. At Monroe House, the lines grew long. People needing food, medicine, help filling out forms. And yet, behind a few whispered conversations, she felt eyes on her, weighing her, wondering if she was the hero the neighborhood wanted. Or the traitor the internet said she was. One afternoon, Tessa stood in the office sorting supply forms when Linda, now a part-time volunteer, appeared beside her. Linda was a short, soft woman in her 50s, with dyed honey blonde hair and tired, kind eyes. She placed a cup of tea on Tessa's desk. "You haven't eaten lunch?" Linda murmured. "I'm not hungry." "Try again," Linda said gently. Tessa's shoulders sagged. "Linda, people online think I'm something ugly." "They think what they want," Linda replied. "Truth is quieter, but it lasts longer." Still, the weight lingered. Rowan didn't escape judgment either. Not even close. Internal Affairs launched a formal investigation into his unapproved humanitarian operation. Words like protocol violation, misuse of federal resources, and overstepping authority were thrown around. His supervisors weren't unkind, but rules were rules. He was suspended for 1 week. 1 week felt like a month. Rowan wasn't made for stillness. He paced his apartment, Odin trailing closely behind, nudging him every time he got too stuck inside his own head. The dog's 5-year-old body was strong, disciplined, but his eyes radiated concern, like he could sense Rowan's guilt long before Rowan could speak it. On the last day of suspension, Rowan sat on his balcony, staring into the dying sunset. Odin rested his head on Rowan's knee. The agent whispered, "I tried, buddy. I really tried." Odin licked his knuckles softly. And somehow, that small gesture hurt more than any bullet wound. Meanwhile, Monroe House struggled. Not financially. Rowan had secured grants quietly through contacts. But emotionally. People came for help, yes. But trust was fickle. Suspicion clung to the air like humidity. A young man named Devon, tall with faded tattoos and wary brown eyes, approached Tessa one morning. His hoodie was worn, zipper broken, sleeves too short for his long arms. "You help people, right?" he asked, voice low. "That's why we're here," Tessa answered. He hesitated before holding out a letter, an eviction notice. "I'm late on rent. They're kicking me out." "We'll look at it together," she said. He swallowed hard. "I don't trust cops or people who work with them." "I'm not a cop," she said gently. "I'm a mother who knows what eviction feels like." Something softened in Devon's face. Not fully trust, but a fracture in the wall he'd built around himself. She helped him apply for emergency assistance and connected him with a temp job. As he left, he paused. "I saw what they said about you online," he muttered. "People are stupid." Then he handed her something shyly folded, crayon on paper. A drawing of Monroe House. A little girl holding a dog. A woman standing beside them. Written in a child's handwriting, "Miss Tessa and Odin saved our neighborhood." And there it was, the fuel that kept her going. One evening, long after closing, Tessa lingered in the main hall sweeping the floor. The lights were dim, casting long shadows. Odin wandered slowly, sniffing corners as if checking for ghosts. Suddenly he froze, head lifted, tail straight, ears forward, body rigid. He stared at the doorway, an unblinking line of focus. Tessa followed his gaze. No one there. Nothing moved. But Odin walked toward it, silent, cautious, then stopped again and looked back at her, eyes dark with warning. A chill rippled across her skin. For a moment, she felt it, as if something unseen was watching, waiting, deciding whether to step forward or disappear. Then the lights flickered. Only for a second. But it was enough to make her whisper, "Lord, please keep this place safe." Odin pressed his head against her leg gently, and somehow she knew he felt the same thing. The next day, Rowan returned. No badge on display, no triumph. Just a man walking into a place where he wasn't sure he still belonged. When he stepped inside Monroe House and saw the line of people waiting, his face changed. Not surprise. Something deeper. Something like gratitude. Volunteers greeted him warmly. Devin nodded at him. Linda waved him over. But the strongest reaction came from Lila. She sprinted across the hall, nearly tripping, and grabbed Rowan's hand with a squeal. "Agent Hale, Mommy said you were coming." Rowan blinked, startled. Then he crouched down, smiling softly. "Did she now?" "She said you help people, and you have the coolest dog," Odin barked once, tail wagging proudly. The hall filled with laughter, not loud, not grand, just human. That evening, as Rowan and Tessa walked the rows of people needing help, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but trust. Respect. Two lives with different scars discovering the same quiet destiny. To stand between pain and the people suffering from it. Tessa found her voice becoming stronger, surer. Rowan found his purpose becoming clearer, brighter. By the end of the 6th month, Monroe House was overflowing, people seeking hope, guidance, assistance. And though change doesn't come overnight, something undeniable began happening. Neighbors greeted each other instead of crossing the street. Teenagers volunteered instead of breaking things. People asked for help instead of hiding their needs. A neighborhood that long suffocating under mistrust began breathing again, little by little, week by week. Because kindness, even when mocked, always plants seeds. And hope, even when doubted, always finds soil. If this chapter stirred your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. May God bless your days, guard your nights, and send miracles to your doorstep. A full year had passed, yet the memory of that morning, of gunfire, snow, and fear, still lived quietly in the bones of the neighborhood. Seasons had come and gone, carrying with them the ache of old wounds and the healing of new beginnings. Monroe House stood strong, its windows glowing softly each night like candles against the dark. The neighborhood wasn't perfect, not yet, but it breathed easier now. Laugh lines slowly replacing the scars of mistrust. On a cool autumn afternoon, Rowan, Tessa, Lila, and Odin walked down the familiar cracked sidewalk leading to the gas station. The same one where Tessa had given up her last $9. The same broken patch of pavement where Rowan's warm blood once mixed with melting snow. The same corner where Odin had stood between death and the man he refused to lose. The station had changed. People had too. The old rusted pumps were replaced. The once faded walls were now painted with a clean coat of pale cream. Flower pots sat beside the door, tiny splashes of color trying their best to survive city life. A small chime tinkled as Rowan pushed open the door. The clerk behind the counter wasn't young anymore. Gray had begun threading through his short curly hair, and the wrinkles along his forehead had deepened. His name tag read, Sam. His shoulders hunched slightly, as if he'd carried a year's worth of regret and didn't quite know how to set it down. His dark brown skin looked tired, but his eyes, kind, weathered, weary, softened when he saw Tessa. "You came back?" he said, voice cracking a little. Tessa nodded, her curls pulled back into a neat tie, her posture steady in a way it hadn't been a year ago. "We wanted to." Rowan reached into the small tote bag he carried and pulled out a wooden plaque, smooth, polished, engraved with careful hands. He knelt near the entrance and held it against the wall. Odin sat beside him, tail sweeping the floor rhythmically as if sensing the gravity of the moment. Together, Rowan and Tessa fixed the plaque into place. When they stepped back, the sun hit the metal letters, and the words shimmered. Here, where fear ruled for a moment, a mother with only $9 chose to save a stranger's life. Kindness this small can change an entire neighborhood. Silence stretched across the station. Sam stared at the plaque for a long moment. His breathing grew shaky, shoulders rising and falling unevenly. Then he wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, rough hands that once locked a door while someone else bled outside. "I saw you running toward him," Sam whispered, "and I locked myself inside." He swallowed hard. "I've carried that with me all year." Tessa stepped forward. Her voice was gentle, steady. "Fear makes us human. But courage doesn't always mean running into danger. Sometimes it just means choosing differently the next time." Sam nodded, tears clinging to the edges of his lashes. "Thank you," he murmured, "for letting me try again." They left him standing beneath the plaque, staring at the past without trying to run from it anymore. As they walked home, leaves skittered along the sidewalk, crunching under Lila's tiny sneakers. She ran ahead, braids bouncing, humming a tune she made up on the spot. Rowan walked beside Tessa, hands in his jacket pockets, Odin glued loyally to his heel. Halfway home, they spotted a young man sitting beside a stalled car. He was maybe 20, maybe younger. Latino with short, raven-black hair, olive skin, sleepless eyes, and a shadow of stubble across his jaw. His hoodie was torn at the sleeve, his backpack frayed. His hands shook slightly as he held his phone, switching between apps helplessly. When he looked up, his eyes were red, not from anger, but from panic. "Are you okay?" Tessa asked. He let out a breath that broke in the middle. "No, I'm late to pick up my daughter from daycare. My car won't start, and I don't have enough for a tow. And the late fee is..." His voice cracked. "She's only 3. She cries when I'm late." Something in the way he said it tugged at Tessa so sharply she almost felt herself pulled backward through time. Back to nights she ran through the cold, chasing bus routes so Lila wouldn't be the last child waiting. She opened her wallet. Inside lay 2 20s and a 10. She took out all 3 bills and pressed the money into his palm. He blinked. "Ma'am, I can't take this." "It's not charity," Tessa said. "It's a loan from the universe. You'll repay it the day you help someone else." He held the money with trembling fingers. "Why would you do this?" Tessa smiled softly. "Because someone once taught me that kindness isn't mine to keep. It's meant to move." Odin nudged the young man gently, his way of saying, "You're not alone." The young man gave a shaky laugh and whispered, "Thank you." That night, Monroe House hosted its first anniversary gathering. People filled every corner, seniors smiling in folding chairs, kids running between tables, volunteers serving food, music humming low. The room smelled of warm bread and lemon cleaner. But more than that, it smelled like something rare. Belonging. Rowan stood at the podium, his FBI badge tucked away, sleeves rolled up, humility radiating off him like warmth. Odin sat proudly at his side, looking like a sentinel carved from loyalty. Rowan cleared his throat, scanning faces. Devon in a freshly ironed shirt, Mrs. Patterson holding flowers, Sam standing awkwardly at the back, Marilyn watching from a corner with softened eyes she didn't know how to hide. "You all know what happened a year ago," Rowan began, voice steady yet slow, shaped with gratitude. "A bullet changed my life. But so did a mother who refused to look away, even when fear told her to." He looked at Tessa. She didn't flinch from his gaze this time. "You don't need a uniform to be brave," Rowan continued. "And you don't need a badge to change a neighborhood. Sometimes—" He glanced at Odin with a small smile. "Sometimes the greatest hero is a mother with $9 left and a dog who believes in goodness more faithfully than any of us." People clapped, softly at first, then stronger, filling the hall like rising wind. When the applause faded, Rowan leaned into the microphone. "I have one final question for all of us tonight. A question that decides the kind of world we hand to our children." The room grew still. "When you look at a stranger, do you see a person? Or do you only see your prejudice?" The silence afterward didn't feel empty. It felt full, like a door opening. And there, in the soft glow of the Monroe house lights, it was clear that the story didn't need more chapters. Not because it was finished, but because it had already begun to live in the hearts of the people who would continue it. If this story touched your spirit, please like and subscribe. May God bless your path, guard your home, and send His miracles upon your life. In the end, this story is a reminder that God's miracles rarely arrive in thunder or lightning. Most of the time, they come quietly through ordinary people who choose compassion when fear tells them to turn away. In every neighborhood, in every struggle, there is always someone who needs a hand and someone who can offer one. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment to tell us what you felt, and subscribe to stay with us on this journey. May the Lord bless your home, protect your family, and guide your steps with His grace every single day.